Well, welcome back, everybody, to Church Stories, a series of conversations devoted to sharing the stories of our church planters. My name is Andrew Estes, and I'm excited this week to have a friend, Kurt Edmondson from Emerge Church outside of the Indianapolis area. Kurt, thank you so much for just taking some time for us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me in. I'm excited to share today and so grateful for what you do for us, Andrew. So thank you.
Absolutely, man. Oh, thanks. Well, why don't you give us just a little bit of a snapshot before we get into the whole church plant conversation? Just give us a snapshot about just a history about you, your family, your life and ministry prior to moving into the church planting world.
Yeah, so I have been in sales all my life. For 15 years prior to moving into ministry, I was in ministry full time, and now I moved back into doing a church plant and into sales. So I am co-vocational and really truly enjoying that and having the opportunity just to do both ends and truly be out in the marketplace. And it's led to more fruitful conversations overall. But outside of that, my family, been married to my wife, Emily, for 20 years this year, which is unbelievable that she's put up with me for that long. And we have four wonderful kids from 15 down to 6. She turns 6 next week. And so it's just a crazy time in our lives, having kids from elementary to high school and planning a church and running around. But we are all doing really well in the midst of it and really enjoying it. So that's just a little bit about me. We kind of grew up in this area. My wife grew up in Fishers, and we're back here in her hometown, and having that opportunity just to be here and around everyone, that our family and friends and just on this journey together. So it's been pretty awesome.
That's really cool, man. So, why don't you give us a second, just walk us through what was it like to, so I mean, if you started in the business world, I mean, like when did you get called into ministry and how did that kind of start? And then maybe just kind of walk forward from there of how that launched into what church planting is for you just recently, right? I mean, it was only a couple of years
Yeah.
ago.
Not even hardly, because we launched in April 19th of 2020. It was our official launch date. So we're just about a year and a half into it. But really just the overall calling, a good friend of mine, is now about 15 years ago. He came to me and he said, "Kurt, God told me you're going to be a campus pastor." And I laughed him off the page. All of our friends, it became a running joke. I was called Pastor Kurt. You're going to be it. And I'm like, nope, I will make a lot of money for the ministry, and I will serve and I will fund the ministry that way. I'm not going to go on staff, I'm not going to be a campus pastor. And they're like, no, it's going to happen. And so just kind of fast forward on throughout the years. It was after 15 years almost that I was in the sales force. About 10 years before that, then my pastor at the location that I was at, or at the church I was at, he said, "Hey, what do you think about being a campus pastor?" I'm like, whoa, mind blown. I had to pray about it. And he's like, "Good. If you didn't pray about it, I wouldn't hire you." And so we spent about 6 months in prayer about it and trying to determine that God was truly leading us. We laid our fleece down on many different items so that we could just make sure that we were truly following, truly hearing that we're supposed to make that move, because it was a massive change in lifestyle, finances, going from the secular workforce to coming into a church and leading a location and all that. So that was kind of the transition and move. And I was a location pastor for over 4 years. And then God said, "It's time to go." And I said, no. I said no multiple times. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. I don't want to start a church. I love where I am. I love what I'm doing. I'll retire here and continue to love on these people and doing what I love to do. And it just kept coming back and coming back. And so I went to a time of prayer again. It was about a year worth of it, and different segments, and just laying the fleece and saying, "God, you've got to move these mountains, and you have to prove that this is what you're calling me to do. Because I'm not going to move ahead of you, but I'm also going to make sure that you're with me in the middle of it." And so it's just times of certain prayer and certain requests. I'm calling laying the fleece like Gideon did, and just saying, "All right, you got this. Now make sure that I know. I want to know that you're in this and that you're leading us to do it." And so it was about a year and a half of prayer time, in essence, not dedicated every single day by any means, but on and off, there's some certain times of fasting and prayer that just led us into the whole transition and where God led us into and start an Emerge Church.
So that was, so you talked about a campus. Was that actually starting Emerge, like a year and a half of prayer going into like what that was, so yours your
Good question.
church plant?
So that when I was mentioning the campus, that's when I went into ministry the full time for the church that I was at. And so I was a location pastor or a campus pastor at that time for about 4.5 years. And about 3 years into it, I'm hearing God calling me to leave that church behind and go start Emerge Church. And so that was the process of just taking the time of prayer and fasting and making sure that this is what God is calling me to do, because I didn't want to step out and do it on my own. And so then stepped out and eventually took a job to get back into the sales world. And I was in the sales world for about 8 months before we started Emerge Church. And that way I had separation. There was time to build the church website in the background and the late nights of the hours, put together the bylaws, the beliefs, pull all of everything all together, get my 501c3, there's just all this busy work in the background, pulling it all together. And I was just doing that in the midst of working full time for someone, and then eventually launching the church.
Wow. So you mentioned already, was it April 2020 was when your official
Yeah.
launch was? So that's the heart of the pandemic. Like everything's going nuts at that point. So what was that kind of like as you were leading up to that? Obviously, probably kind of crushing a lot of momentum or just shifting it a lot, and just that whole emotions. I mean, you had to been going through a lot during that time. So why don't you walk us through what that was like?
Yeah. So it would be in January of 2020 when we kind of pulled together a group of launch team of volunteers that we had meeting in our home on Saturday evenings. And we would just sit, plan, dream, pray, pull things together and start moving, as I like to say, kind of moving the ball forward to try to get towards the launch date. And we all heard and we all wanted to go towards April 19th, right after Easter. That was the goal. April 19th, 2020, we're going to launch and have a public service at that point in time. And so we're meeting weekly, Saturday nights, talking, praying, and like I just mentioned. And coming up into March, we're like, all right, the next 3 or 4 weeks, we are incredibly busy. So we as a family, we need to just have everybody just put everything on pause. Let's get everything reset. We're ready to go and ready to launch on April 19th. About have this contract ready for a location to get locked in. And we're like, all right, guys, we're gonna pause. I'm gonna work on getting the location finalized, and we're gonna launch. And I go to write the contract to finalize on this place, and I kept hearing God say, "Stop." Every time I pick up the pen to write something, to put something towards it, he kept saying, "Stop." I'm like, why? And so eventually I just did not write the contract to get into this location. And literally 3 days later was when the pandemic shut everything down across the nation. The one clause in that contract the guy requested was you have to pay no matter what. If you can't meet, you're going to pay. I'm like, wow, thank you, Lord. Thank you for stopping us from doing that. So, we had the pandemic came. We're still kind of meeting via Zoom as a launch team. And April 17th, we all said, let's go. We're going to launch online. So we launched online on April 19th. Fumbled forward, as I kind of like to say as well, learning as we went. I'm not the best at technology. We didn't have the whole team pulling together for technology and running everything, but all I needed is an iPhone and my Bible, and that's all I basically had, and that's where we went. We tried to do some worship online. That failed, figuring out things along the way. So, Zoom has this fantastic thing that compresses sound, and we didn't have any idea. And I didn't hit mute. So you hear me singing loud over the top of the worship leader, the music going ding, 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 just sounded horrible. And it was a interesting first couple of Sundays, sure, when we were launching online. But you know what? You look back at it, it's like, wow, we've grown big time since then.
Yeah.
But yes, we did launch in the middle of COVID just to answer that. And I'm so glad that we did.
Good, man. Well, why don't you walk us through what the last year and a half or so has been since then? I mean, when were you able to start meeting in person? What does life and ministry kind of look like coming out of that season for you?
Absolutely. So, as we were launching the church, I was still employed full time throughout the week. And then mid June, I pulled myself away from that job as full time, but went as a 1099 or a independent sales rep and working for a few companies so that I can be co-vocational, be able to make ends meet for our families. So April 19th, we're meeting online. We start meeting kind of as a group as volunteers, not really as the church just yet, because of all the COVID restrictions that we had in and around us here in Indiana. We couldn't gather as many people in different places. But during that time, I was going around and trying to find our location. And so I was asking places, I was reaching out, emailing, calling, stopping by with masks on to talk to people. And, you know, we went through like 50 different locations between May to June of me just phoning, asking our people on the team, asking, and we had 50 locations that we reached out to, and it came down to 3 of them that said yes finally, because everyone was like, no COVID, no COVID, no COVID. But we came down to 3 that said yes, and we were able to go and have our first in-person gathering on September 27th of 2020. And that was meeting in a winery of all places. And so we got a launch in what's called Daniel's Vineyard in McCoursville, Indiana. And it's been an amazing home for us to be there and to be able to meet and gather on Sundays. And they're closed as a facility until Sunday afternoon. So the whole building and everything is ours. They hold wedding events, weddings and events all the time. And so it's just an amazing place with a great atmosphere, about 20 acres. You have the grapevines as you're driving right in the middle of Indiana, of all places. You only think of cornfields for Indiana, but there are other things than corn in Indiana.
Oh, that's awesome, man. So what is launching this whole journey from the season of prayer leading up to the chaos of what COVID brought, especially to your church plant, like right in your launch time, but being able to meet and having a fabulous location. What has been your favorite part, or what do you love most about your time as a planting pastor so far?
Man, I've really loved the journey. While it's been challenging and hard, it has been an amazing spiritual journey, because the whole thing is I'll see and find myself pushing, because I'm a driven person. I'm going to drive everything as hard as I can. But this has been more of, all right, God's leading it. I got to pull back, because once I push ahead, I'm running out and running ahead of my coverage, and I just have to pull myself back. So this whole journey of not knowing and not being able to not being able to get my arms completely wrapped around everything has been the best part of it for me, to be able to rely more on God in the midst of it. And so it's been awesome to do that. And then in the middle of all that, it's able to see how God is just using the team around us of just normal, ordinary people that have normal jobs that are leading areas of ministry, from our worship leader to kids to youth. They all have a calling and a desire to do it, and they have been equipped. And now I'm seeing them and the fruit from that come from it. And it's pretty awesome just to see them being able to embrace and help and serve in those capacities, because God's given them so many talents. And so in essence, we are all co-vocational. And it's just an awesome thing to be able to do.
Yeah, absolutely. When you to backtrack just a second, when you were
Yeah.
going through just kind of last year, just kind of the duration of last year, when you're leading up to your church plant, obviously everything gets thrown in the ringer with everything that happened or in the spring and moving into summer. And Your launch looks incredibly different. Did ministry change for you the way it did for so many others? I mean, when we're looking at what life and church ministry and all this stuff is, and then all of a sudden we're unable to meet. I mean, what kind of was impacted the most, or what was one of the most profound ways that maybe that you view ministry, that you moved forward with when you started meeting? What was one of the most profound ways that that was impacted or changed in your mind?
Man, there are so many things that was impacted in the middle of it because really, I have always taken advantage of the fact that we could gather in person. I've always taken advantage of that, and when that was taken away, I didn't realize how big of a void that was in the midst of it. And so, what we've done differently, and what we've taken the approach as, is trying to do and gather differently and offer different ways to create community and be a part of it, and try not to replicate what I've always known as a Sunday, a couple of songs and a sermon, and that's it. Set up, tear down, set up and tear down. I don't want to be part of that. And so it's just being able to create these opportunities of going out as groups. Like, for instance, in a couple of weeks, we're all going to Holiday World, which is just an amusement park in Santa Claus, Indiana. Yes, there is a Santa Claus, Indiana. But there's going to be, 45, 50 of us that are going to camp in a campground, go to the amusement park, and then we're going to have meals, sit around the fire, and hang out for the weekend. So, I mean, we're just doing different things differently to create events and atmospheres where people can invite others in and just live life. Got the Sunday gatherings as we go on, but those are things that we're trying to process and to move and to do things differently and ask different questions, and getting everyone together on the same page.
Yeah, absolutely. What has the journey the last couple of years been like for your family?
Great question. It has been a struggle, but amazing all in the same. When we moved from where we'd been at the church, we'd been there for 10, 11 years as a family. So all of our kids basically kind of grew up and knew that. And so then when we pull ourselves away, they've lost that. And so it's coming together. And then in the middle of that, it was COVID. So we came together as a family, and it was amazing. It was beautiful for us to be able to just kind of reset, recenter, refocus, and come together. And so throughout this last year and a half or so, it's been nothing but growth, and there's been some pains along the way. Of course, there's always going to be, but for the most part, it's been a fantastic experience for every single one of us. That I'm seeing our kids leading other kids. I'm seeing, like, my daughter and son, they'll rotate around. They'll run the visuals. They'll run the technology in the back. Or my daughter will go and help and serve in the kids area. And then so will our 6 and 8-year-old, they'll go and help in those areas. And you get to see them serving and making new friends, and their faith is starting to come alive even more. And it's been an amazing journey for all of us as we're navigating through this new COVID and everything else, as well as launching the church, and wouldn't trade it for anything.
Awesome. You mentioned a couple times that you have another job, right? You mentioned the term
Yeah.
co-vocational. For those that are unaware, like bivocational planting and co-vocational planting is kind of a buzz terminology that a lot of people are using these days. Bivocational would be that you have a side job, but you're hoping to go full time in ministry. Co-vocational is really what it's called. Like, you're doing one job and you're called to do ministry at the same time, and trying to continue to live out both as best as God allows you
Yeah.
to. Why don't you just share just a little bit about us, like why did you decide to do that? And also, I think that you've mentioned also with some of your other staff that you're like setting an example, and several of them are doing this as well. What is that kind of like for you, and what does that look like practically?
Yeah. So first of all, staff wise, I'm the only person that's on staff at the church. I said they're doing it co-vocational, but in essence, they're just volunteering their time. So my apologies for the terminology mix up there. But I'm the only one that's truly on staff at Emerge at this point in time. Everyone else is volunteering. But co-vocational for me, why is the desire? Because I can see and I know that a life of ministry is not to be lived poorly. And I've experienced it. I've been on the backside of it, of taking a massive pay cut from sales down to being well below poverty and trying to sustain our family at six. You just can't. And so even when I was doing that and I was full-time ministry, I was still working as a valet on weekends to be able to not have our kids impacted from anything. And so as I'm launching this church, my goal, my desire is to be co-vocational so that, number one, we're able to do the things that we can as a family, that we can have a sustainable life. And when you're starting, you don't have the finances to be able to really have a high paycheck by any means at the church. So co-vocational is a fantastic way to be able to meet both ends. It's going to be a little hairy at times with your time and being pulled. But what is so beautiful about it all is the ministry aspect and the job. So you're not sitting in a church or sitting in your house preparing all throughout the week. Or, when I was in ministry full time, I would just sit at a desk, and if I'd get to go out and have coffee, it'd be awesome. But now I'm sitting in coffee shops all throughout the week. I'm meeting people. I'm talking to people all the time. I'm going on sales calls, telling them about what I'm doing at the church. And it's opened up so many conversations. At the same time, financially, it's been helping the family as well. So it's something that I'm going to continue, because I don't see in the future of the church can truly sustain and keep full-time pastors, especially depending on the size of the church, having full-time pastors and staff, and that's all that they do. I just don't foresee it. And that's why I'm leaning that way. And that's why I'm trying to create this pathway and be able to just truly provide for our family and not be a burden on the church, because what it's turned around is we're giving out 23% of the tithes that are coming in. And from our generosity, we're seeing that the tithes are coming back in just as strong. And it's a massive cycle of, once you just truly trust God and you're giving out over and above, that's when you're going to see. And so I'm tithing from my own co-vocational job back to the church. We're giving that money back out and impacting ministries. We're supporting Nexus. There's all these different things that we're supporting and being a part of, and we're able to do it because I'm not taking as much of a salary. We don't have as much of an overhead overall, and we're able to give back. And that's what needs to be done within the churches. It doesn't need to be, it's my money, I'm holding on to it. No, it's God's. And we're called to at least tithe 10%, if not more. And the more generous you are, the more fruit you're going to see from it.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. When you're moving forward, obviously September's right around the corner. Everybody's, fall launch mode, post Labor Day, going into this next season of ministry. What are you most excited about for your next year as a church?
Yeah, so I'm in the process of moving locations. While the vineyard has been amazing, I have 3 Sundays in September that I cannot gather. And then I have more coming up. And so with their business taking off, they're starting to block out our calendars. So it's time to look at new options. So what I'm really excited about is that place has been an amazing opportunity, but it's also been a hindrance. So there's some people that have had battles with alcohol that they're not going to walk into a winery. I don't blame them. I wouldn't either. But I haven't finalized the contract, but at least 3 people have said, yes, you can move. And so I'm not ready to say where we're going to go, but I'm pretty sure it's just right around the corner. And I'm super excited about that, because we're going to be able to partner with this facility even more to reach more people within the community, because that is the desire. That's the goal. And it's a fantastic match for our personality, our church, as well as the location that we're going into. And it's going to create some more visibility. And so I'm super excited about that. So I'm relaunching and launching and moving all at the same time. I can't wait to see what comes from this one.
That's awesome, man. Well, last question for you. What has your relationship with Nexus been like over the last few years as you've walked this path of church planting?
Yeah, great question. Man, I couldn't tell you how much it has meant to us We had launched April 19th. We went through and did the assessment after we'd already launched online. And so we're kind of the cart before the horse. We're kind of the enigma and everything. But I am so glad that I ran into Steve Bolin, who brought me into Nexus to have the conversation with Phil. Felt loved and cared for from the moment that we started the relationship and talking and bringing, everything fully to the front, going through the assessment process. It is one of the best processes for our family. My wife and I, when we went through it, we've done other assessments where it was not so life-giving, but this one was with Nexus was completely life-giving. It wasn't easy by any means, but it was life-giving. We felt loved, cherished, challenged all at the same time. And coming from that, then being coached by the staff here, and Nexus just has provided that pastoral care, the coaching, the counseling aspect, and it has truly helped us. And I was sharing before we started recording that we were able to go and do one of the Nexus events in a couples retreat. And it was just a fantastic time for Emily and I to connect with other pastors and their wives going through the same situations, to know that we aren't in this alone where we're at right now. It was so encouraging for both of us just to spend those 3-4 days together with others with no agenda, but truly just to love on each other and to build each other up and create some new friends. And so you can't do ministry alone. Many people want to do that. I find that all around me out here. I'm always reaching out to pastors and trying to encourage them to get into groups either and so that they can have that association with others. And you just can't do it on your own. And you gotta involve yourself with others. And I'm so glad to be part of Nexus.
Awesome, man. Well, Kurt, thank you so much for just your dedication to the kingdom, man, for your leadership in ministry, especially co-vocationally, and just the freedom that brings, and all of the connections that brings. We pray that God would continue to bless your church, Emerge Church, in the Indianapolis area. And yeah, man, thank you so much for just taking some time for me today.
Thank you, Andrew. Really appreciate it.